Hello and welcome to our third small group session. Over the last few weeks we've been looking at discipleship and community, and this week we're going to be looking at mission. As we have been doing over the last few weeks, we've got a question that we want to ask you to talk about in your groups just to get you chatting and thinking together. So the question for this week, what is your dream holiday destination? We want to know your dream holiday destination. Have a chat in your group and we'll be back in a few moments. Lauren, do you want to let us into what your dream holiday destination would be?
I've got a list, but I think top of the list is Canada.
Interesting.
Nowhere specific necessarily, just like the idea and the concept of Canada as a whole. Quite like the idea of doing like a train ride through the Rockies. That's always looked quite pretty.
Wow. Amazing.
Very good.
What about you, Catherine?
Well, I would say that I've always had a bit of a hankering to go to Hawaii.
A hankering for Hawaii?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Any particular reason?
Well, I've quite liked over the last however many years watching Hawaii Five-0, like the new version, not the old version.
Right.
And it just looks like a really good place to go, not because of the crime and violence, but because of like just the sun and the sea and the really chilled vibe.
Chilled vibes.
Yeah.
That's what you're all about. Great.
How about you?
Well, whenever I've planned a holiday or holiday destinations, it's mostly based around the food that I'm going to eat when I get there.
Wow.
So that coupled with, I've always fancied doing like a big, long road trip type holiday. So I'd love to start at the very north of Italy and work my way down through the various regions and eat all sorts of Italian food.
Fabulous.
And, yes, love it.
Very
Absolutely
good.
Love it. Today we're talking about mission, and we're going to use a story from Acts chapter 3, a story that's actually in between the two passages that we looked at last week. And in this story, we have the characters of Peter and John and a man who was in need of healing. All three of those characters had a particular destination in mind for where they were heading in that day. But for all three of them, the journey took a very unexpected turn. And we're going to encourage you to read that in your groups. So grab a Bible and turn to Acts chapter 3, verses 1 to 10. Read that together, and then we'll come back in a few moments and unpack some thoughts around that passage. So today we're thinking all around this theme of mission, but before we go any further, I thought it'd just be helpful for us to unpack a little bit what we mean when we use that word mission. So I wonder if one of you maybe chip in some thoughts with what that's all about.
Yeah, so I had a look in the dictionary actually, just to see what we would find in there, and it talks about an organisation, religious organisation, often Christian, who know that their responsibility is to go out into the world to spread its faith. So I guess at a basic level, fundamental level, it's about going out and sharing the faith that we have.
Okay. Practically, how does that look in terms of what we do and how we live?
So we, it kind of in our discussions around this, have thrown around this phrase, a missional edge. And the idea being that actually everything we do in the life of Swanbank is something that we want people to feel comfortable coming into as they journey through kind of the very beginnings of a faith journey. So the idea being that things we do are accessible, it's a safe space to answer questions and to ask questions. And we want that for our small groups. It's one of the reasons we've put this session into this introduction, is that we would love for our small groups to have that missional edge. And we see in the stories we've looked at so far that these are communities, and in Acts you had a community that wasn't just desiring to serve itself, but was desiring to look outside of its boundaries and serve the wider community around it. And we do that in loads of different ways here. You can probably list all the ways Swanbank does it better than me from being in the office.
And there's a sense by which this is not only something we do in our individual
Yeah.
lives following Jesus as individuals, but it's also not just something we do as communities. There's a mixture of both there, isn't
Yeah.
there? And so some of the ways that might play out in the life of our church is through food bank, through youth club, through actually our small groups having a missional edge to them, our Sunday gatherings having a
Yeah.
missional edge to them. So there being that corporate community focus on doing mission together, but also in our lives as individual followers of Jesus, there always being that missional edge in terms of inviting other people to join us in the journey that we're on in
Yeah.
seeking after Jesus and following him.
And I think not forgetting that a really important part of our mission is not just focused around coming here,
Yeah.
but actually about us going out as well. So I think it's both and. I think we engage in mission as we outwork our faith within our church community, but we do so as we're out in the world, engaging in whatever's going on within our communities, within our workplace, within our home lives, wherever we find ourselves. Our lives, if we're following Christ, then our lives ought to be lives of mission. So moving beyond just seeing us as doing mission, but actually as living out our missional calling. So it actually it comes into every aspect of who we are if we are living as faithfully as we would want to.
And the phrase you used earlier, the missional edge,
Yes.
For me, that's really helpful. How can I, as a follower of Jesus, make sure that every part of my life has a missional edge
Yeah.
to it? I think that's really helpful.
Good.
Returning to the passage then, there's a few things that came out as we were discussing and thinking through what God might have to say to us through this passage of Scripture. So Catherine, I wonder if you just unpack for us a little of what's going on in those opening few verses and how that sheds some light on our mission.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're given a really helpful starting point in this story, as we're told that Peter and John were going up to the temple at the hour of prayer. So right at the start, we have the scene set that, as is their custom, they're off to the temple to pray. So what we see built within their pattern of living is a really important foundation of prayer and worship. So we have two followers of Jesus, Peter and John, who are faithful in their life of worship and prayer. And I think we need to recognize the unfolding of that story within that context for us to helpfully understand what's going on here.
Yeah, and there's a real challenge there, isn't there, to be people who live our lives with open eyes, to see the need that exists around us, especially being a church where we are in Burslem, where there is so much deprivation, so much need all the time, to be people who live with our eyes open all the time. And I think there's something we could explore, we're not going to today, but the relationship between being faithful in prayer and living lives with our eyes open is an interesting one. I wonder what we learn from Peter and John in how they respond to that need that they see.
I think we see that need being really clear. Like, this wasn't an unusual place to find somebody sat at the edge begging. I imagine that for the majority of this man and the lives of the people around him, they would become quite used to just being almost invisible in that, people throwing some coins down and just carrying on. And in this moment, we see Peter and John being prepared to be inconvenienced. They are prepared to stop their journey. We're told that it's an hour of prayer. There's obviously a specific time to be at the temple, and they're prepared to stop that journey to look at somebody and to interact with them where they're at, and to engage in mission, even though at that moment in time they had somewhere to be and something to do.
Yeah.
This was important enough to them that they stopped, they looked, and they listened.
Yes.
As part of that journey that they carried on.
Yeah.
Taking later.
Yeah.
And you spoke of that man being used to not necessarily being seen all the time. They might have thrown money at him as a sort of routine thing they do on the way to the temple, but what we see here is Peter and John looking directly at him, speaking directly to him.
Yeah.
And then also reaching out a hand to him to to try and help pull him up.
Yeah.
We read in verse 6 of the passage, Peter says to the guy, I've got no silver or gold. That's what he was asking for. But what I have, I give you. That sense of just recognizing what they don't have, but also recognizing what they do have, and using that to be able to offer a transformation to that guy.
And that really speaks into us if we're trying to be missional Christians, in that we can focus on what we don't have, or we can focus on the gifts that we feel we don't necessarily have in abundance or whatever. But actually we all have something that we're able to input into the missional life of the church. And so for Peter and John, they focus on what they do have. And so we find that they speak these words of healing for this man. But at the same time, as they kind of encourage him to get up, they say, stand up and walk in the name of Jesus Christ. And then we're told that they take him by the hand and lift him up. I think that's a lovely, authentic touch to this story, because it speaks about a real holistic response, doesn't it? Yeah. That it's not just speaking words of healing and then they go on their way. Actually, they speak the words of healing, but they reach out the hand and they lift him up as well, which I think is really important.
And I think sometimes we fall into that trap, don't we, of doing one thing or the other. Like we either pray for people, which is fantastic, like I'm not knocking that, it's a great thing to do, or we feed people, or we donate to people, and again, fantastic thing to do, but actually we don't see that kind of complete healing or that complete transformation or that complete encounter with God in someone's life until we do both of those things.
Yes.
Until we're looking at this as not just a spiritual opportunity and not just a physical opportunity, but a moment whereby we can step fully into doing life with other people and bring both of those components together. Yeah,
and I think we see that outworked in the mission of Christ. When we read in the Bible, we see him doing that all the time, responding what we might say spiritually and physically, and that brings a complete, whether it's a healing, whether it's a wholeness, whether it's a journey of forgiveness, whatever it might be, we see Jesus responding in that way.
As a theme that seems to emerge from this story around the importance of accompanying somebody. Yeah. And that also, for me, speaks into our whole concept of mission. The whole idea of mission is not that we magic something up out of thin air. It's that we accompany God in what he is already doing in people. And so that speaks into that holistic idea of prayer. So trying to seek after God's heart and desire for a particular situation or person, and following that up with practical action. And what we see in this story is Peter and John accompanying this man who was in desperate need of healing from the very moment they reach out the hand to lift him up. Mm-hmm. But then also from that point, we see the man accompanying Peter and John then into the temple and him discovering how he can live as a follower of Jesus alongside Peter and John. I wonder what that might teach us about how we do mission and how we respond when we are meeting a need for somebody.
Yeah. I think it's another lovely authentic touch that we have. We've got a few of these in this story. And so as part of this encounter, Peter and John continue going into the temple. So that had been their original destination. They've had this moment, and they go into the temple, but they don't go in alone. They don't go in so two becomes three. And so for this man, it's been such a dramatic moment, such a transformation, that I guess he must have all sorts of questions going on in his head. He must be thinking, this is just kind of almost unbelievable what's going on in my life in this moment. I've encountered something through these two men, and I need to know more. I need to see what's going on here. So we're told that he goes into the temple with them. I just love that. I think that's fabulous that we see that and that we're told that in this story.
Because we don't often, do we? Like in practice, we don't always see that moment.
No.
We don't always see the moment that the people we've interacted with walk into church or walk into that relationship with Jesus.
No.
And there comes that element of having to trust that we're not called to do that transformation, that God will. And also there's other people involved. Like this interaction didn't happen by itself. They weren't just sort of three people hidden in a corner. There were witnesses. There were people who would have seen this. And I think sometimes we forget about the impact on the people who witness the intentional missional opportunities that happen.
Yes.
The people on the periphery of that
Yeah.
who start to ask questions or start to just think and hold that little thought in the back of their head that then comes forward, again, in ways we can't imagine and ways we may not see.
Yes. And we're told that, aren't they? The people around see what's going on and they're amazed. So you can imagine the like domino effect, can't you, of that? And again, we hear that in some of the other stories in our Bible and encounters that Jesus has with people, that as a consequence of Jesus engaging with someone, then we hear of villages or towns, of people who come out and they're amazed at what's going on. So that knock-on effect is really important as well. And I think is maybe something that we might sometimes miss when we think about our missional work. You know, actually, what's the impact that this is having on the wider community? Or, you know, what are there people sitting just asking all sorts of questions? And are we actually making ourselves present to be able to respond to, you know, the questions that might be going on in people's minds or whatever that might be? So I think it's quite important. I guess a little bit back to the beginning of our story, that we go around with our eyes open rather than blinkered.
Amazing. There is so much in this passage to challenge us and encourage us around our mission as individuals, as a small group, as a wider church community as well. So we're going to encourage you, as usual, to take some time to have some conversation around this passage and what you've heard us share a little bit with you today. There'll be some questions on the screen to help you do that. So please do make use of them if that's helpful in your group.